What's up, guys? How you doing? This is one more episode of the Foreigner Podcast, and I'm your host, Andre Günther. I'm very happy to welcome you to this episode and hope you enjoy it and learn from it. If so, then please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and rate me with 5 stars for the episode, for I can grow and reach more people with my podcast. Because I kind of like the format that the last few episodes were in, I will again have 2 main topics of the episode that I will go in on. So let me know what you think of that in the comments or per email at theforeignerpodcast.com. But before I actually get into all of that, I just want to say real quick that I have a new setup. I got a new PC and, of course, new Audacity, because I'm recording my talking with Audacity, and if it sounds any different, then that's probably because of that. I'm really sorry for that. I tried to optimize the sound, but I'm not really sure if I made it as good as I did before. So if you have any recommendations, then of course also send me an email at theforeignerpodcast@gmail.com. But now that's enough of that, and I want to get into what I want to talk about today. So the 2 parts, maybe you've guessed them from the episode, is losing your English skills or whatever language skills you might have obtained in your year abroad. And then I want to talk about global awareness. That's at least something. And then, of course, there will also be a quote of the episode and an item of the episode. So, as I just said, the first thing that I will talk about is losing your language skills. As you maybe can hear, I already start to lose my English. There are more breaks or more ing of me, and the vocabulary, I think, gets a little bit simpler throughout the duration of my podcast, and that's only after being back for about 5 months now. I mean, I still sometimes wake up in the morning and start thinking in English, but that is very rare and probably just happens because I'm generally confused in the mornings. And it's very scary and frightening to see my own English, going away and my English skills, as you probably have heard by now if you have been following the podcast. And that actually worries me a lot. I don't want to lose my English, but I am losing my English. And I'm not already through the whole process of losing it yet, if it ever does end. But what I can say already is that at first you start losing your vocabulary. The vocabulary I use gets simpler and easier, and more of the words you don't often use that are more specific to one single topic, they go away pretty fast and you forget them. And then you might hear them again and be like, oh yeah, I remember that word. But you couldn't bring it up if you would actually be talking about that. And then second, you lose your pronunciation. You maybe have heard it, at least I heard it when I was listening back to my first episode. My accent of the German influence seems to get bigger and bigger, which is actually really awful for me. Because I don't like the German accent. It sounds so weird. But my German accent gets stronger and stronger throughout me being at home. And that's not a cool thing. And yeah, as I said, I have not fully gone through the process. And I hope it ends somewhere and I won't drop back to the normal English that I would speak in school without having had an exchange year. But I'm not sure where it does end and if it does end. So that's another thing that scares me. I mean, for now, I can still write pretty good in English and I still understand everything I read or hear in English, no matter how fast or what accent. I even understand Scots. I even understand Scottish. So the understanding part is not the bad thing. But the speaking part gets worse and worse at the beginning. And of course, after 5 months of being back in Germany, I'm still way ahead of my school English, so I'm not that concerned about my English skills regarding the school, but I do lose it, and I do get worse in English, so that's worrying me. But I also want to talk about what I do to lose it slower, or to slow the losing process if possible. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I cannot stop it, but at least make it a little slower. And well, I do this episode and this podcast where I talk English and try to talk as good English as I can for better understanding of English people. But as I said, you can hear the differences. Then I also watch a lot of English YouTube. Like I said, I can even understand Scots. I watch a few Scots that do videos and I can understand them with ease. But hey, I hope that helps at least. And I listen to English podcasts and stuff. But yeah, I'm still losing it. But I think that this kind of helps because that's where it happens that you hear a word that you once knew, forgot, and then you know it again, at least for a few days. And if that happens a lot, then maybe it will be better for my English skills. Then that's a pretty odd thing. I use English resources for research that I could do in German. Like if we have to find something out for German that I think is better to express in English, then I'll just research the topic in English and then translate into German later because that's pretty easy. But I don't research all in German. If I can, I go back on the English resources. And I hope that that kind of helps me with keeping my English, but I'm not quite sure. Then, of course, I try to have conversations over Snapchat or Skype with people back in my foreign home, with people I knew during my exchange who are Americans, and they, of course, American English is their native language, so I sometimes hope that that helps, but of course that can't happen all the time, and most of my conversations still happen in German with German people. Then I write some stuff in English or translate stuff in my head, but that's a thing I can't really do too often because I don't really have that much of a time. I mean, I'm scripting all the episodes that I'm doing for my podcast, but that's only bullet points. Like I don't write the texts. I usually just write the moderation at the beginning, but then when I get into the actual part of presenting the contents of this episode, I don't want to write like 10 pages, which it would probably be, and just read it because that sounds pretty horrible. So I just write bullet points, and I hope that this kind of helps me, but I'm not really sure. And then just a thing that I can generally say is repetition. You and me, we need to actively learn more words and try to practice our English for our English to get better or stay at a pretty decent level. Because if we don't use it, we'll lose it if we don't use it, we'll lose it even faster. And if we do use it, then we will not lose it fast. Oh my god, that sounds so odd. But hey, anyway, so that's what I can say about losing your English. And it's really scary. I will probably do another episode in a while about it and see how it has changed. If it does, I hope it doesn't, or it gets better again. Yeah, that's what I hope for. I hope for it to become better. But I don't see that happening, sadly. But anyway, I think that should be it, and I don't want to talk about that depressing thing no more. So let's move on to the second part of this episode. That will be global awareness. But what is that even? Like, it's just a word that's often thrown around when we want people to be more internationalist or something, but we don't really know what it means. Like, if someone used the word global awareness, you kind of have a sense for what it may mean, but you're not really sure. So I Googled it, and it was actually pretty hard to find lots about it, but I found that according to Bloomsbury University of Pennsylvania, global awareness is a conceptual understanding of global and cultural perspectives with social, political, economic, cultural, and environmental components. Now that's something. That's a word. That sounds like a lot. So I kind of want to break it down slowly for you and explain everything as far as I understand it. So at first, it's a conceptual understanding. The conceptual means that it's like a worked out idea or plan. It's artificial and not a natural thing. It's a guideline that people should follow. It's not a law of nature or anything. It is just a concept created by humans for humans, and it works within the boundaries of the human minds and the human possibilities. And then it's an understanding. So it is a consensus that falls back on the philosophical aspect of like rational thought. It's not something that we can find written down by aliens or God telling us the way it is. No, it is a law. It's not a law of nature, but it is a consensus that we as humans made and that we have to rely on. It's like a social aspect. So we as humans said, because of our rational thought and reasoning, we need to have global awareness, whatever that means. And that's part of it. Part of global awareness is us as humans deciding that we need global awareness. If we don't feel like we need it, we won't have it. Global awareness is not a thing that's there and we need to decide if we want to use it or not. Global awareness is a thing that can only exist when we want it to exist. And that's another aspect of the conceptual part. It's very constructivist. So we as humans decide whether global awareness should be a thing in this world or not. And it is a very social thing because it lives and dies with the people doing it, if they do it. Because if people don't do global awareness, then it won't happen. Now the next part to it is, yes, it's global and cultural perspectives. So perspectives, that kind of means the lenses we use to look at our world and our surroundings, our environment. Like the way that we interpret what is happening, that we understand it, and that we can describe and use it for ourselves. And these perspectives are global and cultural. Global meaning it takes in the entire whole Earth. It's not just two countries or a continent that global awareness works on. It needs to be applied to all bodies of law, being countries and nations and governments and all the people in the world together. It cannot be, global awareness cannot be focused on a few spots on the Earth. It's either all or nothing. So global awareness doesn't work on one country and the other it does, or it's not a thing that you can use differentiated. Either applied to everything or to nothing. Yeah, that's pretty much what a global perspective means. And it also means that the people you apply it to look back at you the same way. Like when you're using global awareness to look at a nation, then they will probably use it for you as well. So that's kind of what global perspective means. And then it's a cultural perspective, which means it applies to all the cultures within nations and within peoples. Their perspectives and their understanding for things are vital to global awareness. Like when you understand how they and their culture are looking at the globe, how their cultural perspectives affect their global perspectives, then you can understand it. And you need to look at it from a cultural standpoint of view as well as a global and all the others that we'll be talking about later. But if you don't understand their culture, because culture is a very, very, very big part to just our identities, and if you don't use the culture to understand other people, then you won't understand them correctly. Because culture is such a vital, important thing to global awareness. Now that's the perspectives. And again, it said that global awareness is a conceptual understanding of global and cultural perspectives. I think we already understood that. And now it is not just that, it's also a global awareness is a conceptual understanding of global and cultural perspectives with social, political, economic, cultural, and environmental components. So I want to break down that one by one as well. It says social. That means that it applies to all the people as groups, tribes, individuals, and their social classes, their social statuses, their social realities. It stands in societies and the factors that the people live in the societies. Like, it means Are they are they a, are they the predominant group or religion in their country? Are they the predominant group or religion in their region? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they teachers? Like a big thing of that is also in the anti-Semitism thing, that you need to understand the cultural perspective of Jewish people is that they were, for a long time in the medieval times, prohibited through their religion to do labor, like physical labor. So they would often become bankers and do financial stuff. And later it was said that they were all lazy and just want the money, only in for the money because they like money so much. But here you didn't understand their cultural perspective and their social statuses, or you misinterpreted them, because by not regarding their religion, you thought that their social status was banker because, well, that's the way they are. They're filthy, greedy Jews that just want to have our money, but not taken in the calculation that there might be other reasons to it. And then, of course, the social realities, meaning if you go on individuals, like, does that person have a lot of friends? Are they lonely? Do they live in a big family, in a small family? Do they live in a tight community or a scattered community? That's all things that are important if you want to understand the ways of other people. And then, of course, their stand in societies. Like, is that a marginalized group that's maybe suppressed by the government? If you look at the Rohingya, I think that's how you say it, Muslims that are currently, yeah, it's difficult to say it, but they are actually treated very badly by the Buddhists in Laos, I think it is. Yeah, if I'm wrong, correct me on that. Like, that's a thing that you need to focus on and that you need to understand. If you don't understand how that group stands in a society, then you may hardly understand their ways and why they do some things. You will not see much sense in their reasoning. So that's very important to look at the social components. Then there's the political components, being just what government system, for example, or what political ideology. A socialist will definitely act differently than a liberalist or something like that. Like, your political opinions also matter a lot to how you act and for people to understand you. That's very important to not lose the political the political base. And also that kind of applies to the social statuses and stuff as well, because political factors and social factors are often very closely related. Like, what is your political stand in your country? Are you a marginalized group or person, or are you not? Are you a prisoner of war, for example? That's as well a social status as a political status, because as a prisoner of war, you have less rights and are treated differently than just any prisoner that has committed a felony or something like that. So the political and social components are often very closely related, and both of them need to be looked at. Now the next one is the economic factors. These are the financial backgrounds, for example, of people and institutions. Like, for institutions, that would be economies or the wealth, and for people, that is usually wealth and employment situation. So what can they afford? How can they compare to others? Is it a rich country or a poor country? Is it a first world country or third world country? That's really important to look at, because then you can understand how their system works for them and why things are that way. If people in a first world country wonder why, let's take any very poor country, why Bangladesh doesn't have as good of a welfare system as Germany does, well, that's probably because Germany is a very, very rich country and Bangladesh is not. And then there's also the economic factors of people that are as individuals or as families. Is it a family from the lower class? Of course, they can not afford the same things that an upper class, very rich family can afford. And these are things to look at. So, as well as on the individual, as on a whole group. Like, it is often the case that black people earn less money in the US than white people. So often the poor people are more black than the white people. And I don't want to get into all of that conflict. That's just a fact. So that's a thing you need to regard if you want to understand the other people. Now, almost the last thing, the cultural components. Cultural are, again, the cultural circumstances that shape the perspectives. Like, as I said earlier in the cultural perspectives part, that the culture is the way you use, your cultural values to understand the world around you. And the cultural components, they shape the perspective that you have. So, cultural things like what are your traditions? They affect how you look at others. Like for Muslims, it's usual to pray on the ground, like kneeling and towards east in order to pray to Mecca, which is not really understandable for Christians because they just pray anywhere, wherever they wanted to. They don't have to find a different, a special direction that to pray to. But that's the thing you need to understand. If there was a Christian and a Muslim, and the Muslim would suddenly drop to the floor, triangulate themselves in one direction and start praying, the Christian would be very, very like confused. And same if the Christian just folded their hands, put their head down and started whispering to themselves, the Muslim would be pretty confused. And if you don't understand how those cultural components work for the other, you will hardly understand their ways and their traditions and the way that they function in their society. Now, the last one is the environmental components. That means what is my surrounding world? What is my environment? Yeah. So where does a group of people live? What are the biomes, for example? What social surrounding do they have? Do they live in a poor or a wealthy community and neighborhood? Or do they live in a cold region, in a hot region? Like, of course, if you look at the clothing, then a person that lives in Siberia will dress differently than a person living in Italy. That's just normal because in Siberia it's way more cold than it is in Italy. But if you don't look at that, in what environments they live, then you will not understand them. And all the islands in the Pacific Ocean threaten to just be completely destroyed by global warming and the sea level rising. Well, we need to understand their ways, and we need to understand the problems they're facing with every glacier dropping into the water and melting, meaning more of their landmass just destroyed and gone. These are also, all as the other things that I was just naming, things we need to look at and take into consideration if we want to understand other people and their ways. I hope that kind of made sense to you of what global awareness is. I just want to say it again real quick. If you didn't understand it, you can pause and go back to these spots. So global awareness is a conceptual understanding of global and cultural perspectives with social, political, economic, cultural, and environmental components. Good. I hope you understood that. If there are any more questions or any additions you want to make, then comment or send me an email. If it's good enough, then I'll even make an episode about your correction or your idea. If it's just anything you want to say or questions you have, then send me an email and I will answer you. But now that we know what global awareness is, and I kind of said that you needed to understand other people's ways. But so why do we need to understand other people's ways, or why do we need global awareness? Why can't we just be countries like we used to be and not care about each other? Well, at first it's key to understanding the commonalities and differences between people. If we know what the factors are of the other people's existence, we can explain why they are the way they are. And in our world, we meet people from other countries. If we go to on holidays in Spain, like when I did go with my family on vacation in Spain, then we would meet people from all over Europe. And if I didn't have any global awareness, I couldn't understand them. I would just be like, oh, why is that person the way they are? That's pretty weird. And it's key to understand the commonalities. So you need to understand what we are the same as, and you need to understand what you're different as with the people that you meet that are not the exact way you are. And without global understanding, global awareness, you couldn't do that. Now, also global awareness spreads sensitivity to globalization and the effects of it. In a more and more globalized world, we need to understand other parts of the globe. Like, our world gets so connected through the internet and stuff like that, and foreign trade agreements, and just to the possibility to hop in a plane and be anywhere in the world within a day. These are things that mean that we will meet more people that are different than us. And in order to understand them, we need global awareness. And because we have things like foreign trade and the internet, we can't just be our own nation and not care about the others. We can't be isolationist. I think that's the word. We need to work together, and we need to understand the others if we want to work together with them. So that's why we need global awareness, as well as we need it to just relate to other people and to understand each other. Because now that we live in a globalized world, we meet other people that have different values and different cultures than us. We need the global awareness to understand them and to be able to relate to them and to understand them. Now, as I already kind of said, it is fundamental for collective international work on issues like climate change, hunger, and poverty. So that being said, I mean, we need to understand what factors cause starvation in Africa in order to help them, and not just think that some god chose Europeans to not starve and Africans to starve, because that's what the gods do. No, we need to understand that there are factors like just the climate that's different in lots of countries in Africa than in Europe, than the era of colonization. These are all things that are parts of the reasons why lots of people in Africa starve, and in Europe they don't. And it's not a law of nature that says everyone in Africa has to starve now, and the second you come to Europe you will not starve. No, we have starving people in Europe too, and we have not starving people in Africa as well. But like, there are differences, and the children mortality rate in Africa is much higher than Europe. And we need to understand why that is, and we need to understand other people in order to work together with them and to, solve these problems that we have. We need to understand the people in Africa and their problems in order to help them. And we need to understand the people in Italy and Greece that have to deal with lots of refugees coming from the Middle East, in order to work together with them and help the refugees and save the refugee crisis. And I mean, we even have to understand all the people that are scared of refugees in all over Europe and that try to keep them out for every cost, because these are people that have different values than us and that have different fears, and we need to work together. We can't just say they're all stupid and we work against them, even though that might seem easy. No, they are people like us, and they have their problems as well. And only together, united, we can solve big problems like a big refugee crisis. But I'm drifting off. Global awareness fights racism. And here I just want to reference real quick the R word episode, which I dropped out earlier, where I explained racism. Global awareness is key to understand why selecting one trait and dividing people for that trait doesn't work, because there are a lot of traits and a lot of differences that we have, and also a lot of commonalities. So if you want to hear more about racism, then go back to the R word episode. I think it was episode 13. Yeah, I think it was episode 13. Okay, that being said, we need to live together because we are one human people, and in order to live as one, we need to understand and value one another. For that, we need global awareness. That's what I wrote down, and that's what I mean. I mean, we are one people in the earth. If you stop being in your little nutshell of this is my house in my city and maybe in my country, and you start to think in a bigger, more meta way, we live in a big universe and probably a multiverse or whatever, omniverse, I don't know. Nobody does. And there are possibly more and more species out there. So why would we as humans on that tiny, tiny planet around that tiny sun be so divisive and say we are Germans and we are Italians and we are Americans and we are different than you? No, we need to work together because there are problems on our globe. We all sit in this one boat called Earth, and we all need to work together to save this ship because it's going down. There's climate change and stuff. We need together find